So, Lone Rider here, and I want to talk about the difference between the critics and regular people when it comes to going to see films. Now, I was reading something recently where a person actually pointed out when I raised the issue that a lot of times the critics don't seem an accurate metric anymore. A lot of times it seems as if they're trying to steer me towards something. It's actually something that I would not want to see or maybe wouldn't enjoy. And if they're trying to sing something and say it's horrible, it's almost a good indication that I should go see it. And the person pointed out, well, the critics aren't necessarily looking at whether or not a movie is enjoyable or entertaining. They're looking for other things. Does it have what's considered a proper story structure, conclusion, etc. The problem with that is, I think that may be true, but I also think that the implication of that is that the average moviegoer to enjoy a movie doesn't need for it to be well done. And I'm sure there's going to be people who have, low expectations or low standards and will be entertained by anything. Insert bread and circuses joke here. But I think for most people, certainly for me, and for many of the people I know, if the movie has glaring flaws or plot holes or is too stupid or whatever, we're not going to enjoy it. For us, it has to be well enough done for its type of movie. Everything, of course, being judged in its own context. But, what's believable in a movie set in the present day might not be believable in a movie set in a dystopian future, sci-fi world, and vice versa. But within the context of the own world that it's created, do things basically play by the rules of that world? Are they logical in context? Does the character grow and mature and achieve their goal or try to, and does the story, various things that the story raises as far as plot threads, do they at least try to resolve them? Or these are things that I think most of us in the viewing public, not being professional critics, if they were glaring flaws, we wouldn't enjoy the movie. So to say, well, the critics aren't looking for a movie that's enjoyable; they're looking for a movie that's technically good. I think what you're skipping out on is so is much of the viewing public. Maybe not specifically, maybe not explicitly, but whether they realize it or not, most intelligent people aren't going to enjoy a movie if it's poorly done. So, when you say, well, the critics are looking for a well-done movie, not just when it's entertaining, it's almost like you're setting up this dichotomy where you can have a well-done movie without it being entertaining, and you can have an entertaining movie without it being well done. Now, you can have a movie that technically ticks all the boxes of proper storytelling and doesn't resonate with audiences. But I don't believe, and I think, generally speaking, this is borne out in the facts of the world, how people react to films, that I don't believe that you can have a movie that resonates with audiences that is poorly done. And we've seen how many films that have glaring flaws, even those beloved by critics and that the critics are constantly pushing people to see, the audience is like, nah, not really, not my thing. And that, I guess, raises the question. If you're going to defend the disparity between the critics and the audience by saying, well, they're looking for different things, when in many ways they're actually not, why is there that disparity? In particular, why is there the disparity of the critics promoting movies that might actually not be good stories and well done stories? The whole reason you're saying there's a difference between how the general, Joe Public reacts to a movie and how the professional, intellectual critic reacts to a movie, is that the intellectual critic is actually looking for a well-structured, good story. Then how come so often it seems that they're trying to foist movies on people that aren't? And this came to a head after I saw the movie Alita, Battle Angel, which I thought was very well done. And then I started seeing a lot of the criticisms of it. Now, some of the criticisms were typical, social justice posturing. Like one person said something like, well, the character looks too feminine or something. So we should have an ugly cyborg. I mean, I don't know what they're going for there. But a lot of the criticisms that actually talked about the film talked about it in such a way where I had to doubt whether these people saw the movie, because they were criticizing it for things that weren't in the movie. They're saying things like, well, she's a Mary Sue, which is essentially a slang term for an overpowered character who has no flaws whatsoever, and usually is therefore unrelatable to the audience. Have you seen the movie? Not only does she start the movie literally dead and has to be rebuilt and then learn how to live again, so much so that she doesn't know that, to eat an orange you have to take the peel off. She doesn't even know what chocolate tastes like. She doesn't know to watch out in the street because there's like these cars going by. Halfway through the movie, spoiler alert here, she gets in a big fight where she's actually like cut into pieces by the bad guy and nearly dies. What do you mean this character's a Mary Sue? In fact, I would argue that rather than a Mary Sue, the journey of this character in this one movie resembles the traditional story arc of the hero as laid out in films, for example, like the original Star Wars trilogy. The character enters a world, they learn about it, they try to fight and overcome obstacles, they lose, they have to come back, and then they progress towards their goal. And this isn't an original idea. Somebody else pointed out the similarity to the structure in the original Star Wars trilogy. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought that was actually an accurate thing. And it very much is a traditional hero's journey in that sense. And the things they were criticizing it for, it's like they're criticizing it for things that aren't in the movie. Again, when it's not the SJ, whatever, social criticisms about, oh, she's too feminine, or she's not this, or she's not that, or there's not enough overt politicking in it. There's no overt politicking in it, left or right, just so you know. But when they're actually talking about the movie itself and not bemoaning, oh my God, the cyborg has breasts. The criticisms they're leveling at the movie, they're criticizing it for things that aren't in it. Like they say, the character is the same at the beginning as the end. It doesn't undergo any growth. Hello? She learns how to live again. She remembers and learns how to fight. She loses a major battle where she's cut in half. She has to get back up and get going again. She loves and finds out her lover is betraying her, and then he's killed. And then she has to figure out, okay, now I have all this grief and anger. How do I channel it? How do I fight for what I want? And at the end, she not only takes out the bad guy who's running the entire city on the ground, she challenges, the last scene is her raising her sword and challenging the bad guy in the flying city of Zalem, which is ruling over all these people down on the ground in what's basically Zalem's factory, factotum, and scrapyard. Hence the name Iron City, which they never explicitly explained why it's called Iron City, because it's the scrapyard and that's the factory. But you could make the leap very logically. And it's another thing I liked about this movie. They didn't beat you over your head with this is why this is why this. They just showed it through the story. They didn't explicitly have to tell you a lot of stuff. And yes, this was a movie that was very heavy with special effects and fight scenes, but they never relied on that to substitute for having good characters that you could care about and having a story you could follow. And the fight scenes themselves never got confusing or schizophrenic. Like a lot of fight scenes in movies now, the jump cut and the extreme close-up, you can't tell what the hell's going on. These fight scenes were extremely complicated in many cases, but you could always follow the action, and more importantly, they used fight scenes to tell part of the story. There's one scene where Alita goes into a bar and challenges a bunch of bounty hunters, and there's a huge brawl in the bar. Now, you could say, well, they just put that in there because they wanted a huge fight and it would look cool. Yes, but there's an in-universe explanation for it. It makes sense within the context of the story. She wants to have her robot body upgraded to this berserker body that was found on a spaceship. The father figure in the movie, Dr. Ito, won't do it because he's afraid that will, turn her into a weapon because that body was built for combat. She realizes that she needs that body in order to defeat the villains that are threatening her and the people she cares about. So if he won't do it, she figures she'll go to the bar and recruit the bounty hunters to help her. She realizes she either needs the more advanced robot body or she needs people to help her. But she needs something to help defeat this bad guy because she realizes she can't do it. So the fight in the bar, yes, it's an awesome fight and visually it's great and blah, blah, blah. But it's there to further the story. It's there because she saw something that she needed to do in order to progress in what she wanted to accomplish. And this was how she went about doing it. And again, they never relied on the special effects or CGI, despite copious amounts of both, as a substitute for good characters that you could care about. So you're criticizing the story for things that aren't in it, and you're ignoring the virtues that are in it. And that's why I was thinking, well, why, this got me thinking about the fact that there is a difference between the critics and the audience. And I've kind of always, for a long time, I've been thinking, if the critics pan something, maybe I should go see it. So I've sort of been using them as a reverse metric. But this explicitly made me ask myself, why? Why such a difference? And it could be that they're looking for things that aren't in the movie. It could be that there's things about the movie they find unsettling. I know a lot of the media tends to be to the political left. A lot of people to the political left tend to support gun control. In the movie, they do mention when Alita comments in the beginning, when she's being shown around town by Hugo, her boyfriend, she comments on this one cyborg that's carrying this awesome-looking sword. And look at that sword, she says. And by way of explanation, Hugo offers up this fact. He says, all guns are outlawed in Iron City, as is anything that challenges Zalem. Now, this not only explains why the bounty hunter's armed with a sword, and sets up sort of the rules of that universe so that, hand-to-hand combat becomes more, believable in that sense. But it also sort of sets up the understanding of why are people continuing to live in this stratified society with the government's boot on their neck. Why are they tolerating that? Well, because they can't rebel. They don't have access to weapons that don't require immense training and or strength and agility, like, swords, for example. Whereas the government not only has guns, but they have, robot enforcers called Centurions that are armed with machine guns and miniguns. Now, it could be, since you can't really explain the critics' panning of this film by the content of the film, specifically when you look at the things they're criticizing in the movie, a lot of those problems aren't actually in the movie, like I said. They criticize it for lack of character growth. There is character growth. They criticize it for lack of a conclusion. There is a conclusion. She kills the villain who runs the city, and at the very end, she's confronting and challenging the bad guy at his high castle. It's just, they're criticizing it for things that aren't in it. They say, oh, she's a Mary Sue, never has to face adversity. Hello, she gets cut in half. All right? It seems to me that because the critics' criticisms about the movie don't really seem to apply to that movie. It's almost as if they never saw it. Maybe they stem from some other reason. And thinking about, the political aspect, maybe they're upset that there's not enough virtue signaling and social justice, whatever, in the movie. Maybe they're upset about the mention of gun control in the context of enforcing a totalitarian regime. I don't know if that was put in there because of gun politics, or if that was put in there simply as an in-universe explanation for why everybody's carrying things like swords. And it really doesn't matter. It works in the story. It's not really a political digression or lecture. It's mentioned to explain that the guy has a sword, and in a larger sense to explain why people are suffering to live under this particular form of social rule. But if you're a gun control advocate, as many on the left are, and many in the media have this perceived thing that they're to the left, rightly or wrongly, maybe that's why they don't like it. So if you're a leftist critic, and many people in the media are to the left, you might take issue with that. If you're looking for a movie that has social justice signaling, you might take issue with the fact that despite being a movie with a strong female protagonist, this doesn't have social justice signaling in it, etc. Maybe. Or maybe it's something else about the movie that they find unsettling. Maybe it's the dynamic of the society in the movie itself and how the critics see that reflecting on them, right? The average moviegoer, remember what I mentioned in the beginning about the average moviegoer versus the critic. The critic is supposedly the expert. The layman is regarded as the dumb jabon. Some people probably are dumb jabons. In fact, I know some people are. But I think you're not giving really people as much credit as you should be giving them if you think that we're all like that. And a member of the average public can be intelligent. He can even be intellectual. But the problem for the critics is that he's not an intellectual. They are. They are part of what we could call the intelligentsia, i.e. the people who shape and safeguard and promulgate the culture. The problem is, like many people in the intelligentsia, they don't seem to have been doing their job all that well for the last however many years, and they've become increasingly irrelevant to many people. And they're sitting here kind of like the Big Brother character at the end of the movie V for Vendetta, screaming at the top of their lungs, "I want everyone to remember why they need us." And when I see critics attacking the layman, disagreeing with them, some going so far as to say we should remove audience and general public scores from movie websites, that's what I see. I see people desperately clamoring to regain some relevance. And in that sense, you know, the critics, if you look at the difference between the intelligentsia and the man in the street, maybe the critics don't like this movie because they see themselves as the bad guy, as Nova up there in Zalem City floating in the sky, looking down on the rest of us, and they see us as Alita pointing the sword at them and challenging them and saying, you know what, we don't need you, we're done with you, right? Maybe that's why they find it unsettling. Maybe. But for whatever reason, anyway, this was a good movie. Was it a great movie? No. Not in the sense of, is it going to be something that people are teaching in film class, 100 years from now? Probably not. But I would say it was a good movie. In fact, it was a very, very good movie. It far exceeded my expectations. And it never fell into the trap that so many movies do of relying on its visuals to substitute for substance. This was a classic hero's adventure, a really good, great story. It had likable, sympathetic characters who also happened to be capable of kicking copious amounts of bad guy ass. And I honestly think that the fact that so many of the critics are against it is significant in itself. I think beyond the movie's value as a movie, the fact that this may be for many people, like it was for me, a philosophical watershed where we wake up and we say, there's something wrong here. There's a discrepancy. What's going on? And it makes us think. And it makes us think explicitly about the ideas involved and the thought processes and the assessments. And why is it that so many people want to be able to pass judgment? Now, if somebody is an expert critic and they have learned and studied and, fair enough. But then how come their criticism of the movie is so obviously flawed? They're the expert. Why are they saying things like, there's no character development when there clearly is? This character never has to overcome any adversity when she's friggin' cut in half. I think these people are just bad critics. And, the idea that maybe they do see something in the movie that they don't like, but not because it's a critical flaw in the film, as a film. Maybe it's that they see the allegorical structure of this dystopian future society as maybe they see themselves in it and they don't like what they see. Or they don't like how other people might see it. Again, maybe they see themselves as up in that city looking down on the rest of us, and maybe they don't like the fact that we're going to see ourselves as the people looking up, saying, we're done with you. Right? Because then they won't have an excuse to wear a suit and a tie and feel important and have a job. And that's the problem, I guess. If you're not doing your job, why do you have it? If you're not accomplishing your goal, what are you doing with your life? And I'm sure there's some good critics out there and some intelligent critics. And I'm not trying to say all critics are bad or whatever. Just like there are some members of the movie-going public who are dumb jabals. What I am saying, though, is when you dismiss the people for whom the movies are made. Let's be clear. A movie is not made for one or two professional critics. A movie is made to sell tickets to the public. And while that rightly in some cases leads to criticism about dumbing down source material with movie adaptations and things like that, at the same time, you do have to appeal to enough of an intelligent audience that you don't insult them, alienate them, or turn them off, or disgust them. And like I said, critics may be looking for a movie that's technically good, not one that's entertaining. But at the same time, audiences won't be entertained and appreciate a movie if it's not well done and technically good up to a point. So this is a false dichotomy on the part of the critics, I think. And for the critics to say, as they have said in some cases, we should actually eliminate audience scores on, rating websites, Rotten Tomatoes, things like that, because these people aren't reliable. They don't know what they're talking about. When they're the ones for whom the movies are made and who are paying their own money to see it. The more I think about that, the more absurd it becomes. The more I really say to myself, I honestly think the critics see themselves as sitting up there in that hypothetical, metaphorical floating city, looking down on the rest of us in the scrap heap. And I honestly don't think they like that analogy. And maybe that's why they were so damn harsh on this film. It could have been they didn't like the mention of gun control in the context of maintaining a dictatorship. It could have been that they wished there were more, trendy lefty politics. But I honestly think they don't like that imagery. Lone Rider out.